Welcome, everybody, to this week's Mums on Cloud Nine podcast episode. I'm delighted to be welcoming Natalie Forkin here with us today. And we are going to be talking about how to present with confidence and impact. Now, particularly when you're coming back to work or you haven't been in the boardroom for a while or you haven't facilitated a meeting, we can feel very nervous about presenting. And this never really goes away. I mean, I always remember presenting when I was younger, and I had to go on a presentation skills course to really build my confidence because I'd just get myself really anxious and I didn't know how to overcome it. So I did some training on it and then started to really build my confidence. But then when I had my maternity leave and took some time out and wasn't really in meetings anymore, I lost that confidence over that year and I really had to rebuild it. So having this confidence takes time and energy, and that's why I'm really delighted to have Natalie here today to talk us through how do we prepare, how do we build our confidence, because we can all absolutely do it, but it's taking these tiny steps along the way to get to that point of feeling confident. So Natalie, do you just want to introduce yourself, your background, and why you're talking on this topic as well?
Yes, thank you. And hello, I'm Natalie, and I am a strategic leadership and communications coach. My background is marketing. So I've spent many, many years in marketing, working for FMCG, retail, publishing in Australia and in this country. And as part of that role, have had to do an awful lot of presenting and presentations and leading meetings, being involved in meetings, difficult conversations. And it's fair to say that when I started my career and started presenting, I used to hate it. I used to go bright red. And as soon as I opened my mouth, I could feel the redness going up
Yeah.
my face. And the more I could feel the redness, the more I panicked, the more quickly I spoke. And I really didn't enjoy it. But a bit like you were just saying then, Heather, I was lucky enough to work for organisations that would put us through training. I'm a real believer in practice and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And it doesn't need to be perfect, but the more you do it, the more you get used to it. And so over time, the more presentations I did, I think the more comfortable I felt, the better they became, the more skills, strategies, techniques I learnt. And then a few years ago now, I trained to become a public speaking coach. So, really, specially helping people communicate with impact, communicate with confidence, communicate effectively. And whether that's preparing for a big keynote conference speech, or whether it's somebody who's looking to be promoted and has been advised that perhaps they need some help with presenting, or just speaking up in meetings, being able to express yourself in that corporate setting more effectively. And so now I combine the marketing side of things with the presenting and the communication skills.
That's amazing. I love that story. And the thing is, now you're helping other people shine and stand up there so you can be the proud mum.
Yes,
I think that's
absolutely,
cool, though.
absolutely. And it's so true. It is very rewarding, but so many people don't believe in themselves and tell themselves they hate presenting, tell themselves they're not very good, but actually they really are. So I really do enjoy being that cheerleader to help people shine, as you say.
Well, that's a great place to start this conversation. We can be very much that like little gremlin on our shoulder tells us we can't do this, right? And like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be terrible. And as you say, you get those tremors. So how do you overcome that anxiety and those negative thoughts to even get to the point where they're like, okay, I'm going to listen to this and I want to do it and I want to build up confidence, because it doesn't have to be speaking on a stage. It
No,
can just be speaking out in a group of people, whether it's friends, peers, volunteer roles, in meetings at work, all of these places we have to feel like we can speak out and we have a voice. So how do you overcome that anxiety to start with and kind of get that traction?
well, I think it's worth understanding where that anxiety comes from, sort of as a bedrock to it all. And we get anxious because, particularly in corporate settings or work settings, communication can be perceived as a risk. We are not sure how what we are going to say is going to be taken, what sort of reaction it might get. I think, particularly as women, and as you say, particularly coming back from maternity leave, we worry we might be judged, that we can't communicate and that people aren't going to respect what we're saying. And that then is perceived as a risk, far more so than if you're down the pub with your friends or, out for a dog walk with a friend or what have you, where there's far less risk. And because we see it as a risk, that workplace communication, our body, and this goes back to thousands of years ago, we've developed the fight or flight response. And when we perceive that risk, our body wants to keep us safe. And so that's when we start getting adrenaline coursing around our body, because it's putting us in that fight or flight response. We either turn around and, fight for our lives, or we run for the hills. So it's worth understanding that we get anxious because it is a risk, and then really taking a step back and thinking, well, seriously, what is the risk? My life really isn't in danger. Yes, somebody might disagree. Yes, somebody might come back at me perhaps in a strident way. Somebody might have a different viewpoint to me. But, we all deal with different viewpoints. We all deal with disagreements every day. We can cope with it. So if we understand that the anxiety isn't really very rational, the nerves that come with it are our body trying to look after ourselves, and that actually will get through those nerves. And I always think a few nerves means that you care. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be nervous. And like you say, whether it's a presentation, whether it's leading a meeting, whether it's, anything, it shows that you care. The nerves are fine, but we don't need that many of them. It's a natural reaction. And there are many techniques that we can use to help get over those nerves and get over that anxiety.
It's really important, isn't it? I think the reflection is it's just about us having a voice and be able to be heard. And it could be just, some people might even feel they can't speak out on a one-to-one or a small group basis. And actually starting small, like don't think, oh my gosh, if I start thinking about presenting, I've suddenly got to go and present to 100 people. Like even just presenting to a group of 6 people when you're going out for dinner or talking and holding that conversation. It's starting small and growing. When I started out, I did my presentation skills course, and then I started doing version V classes and presenting how to do makeup in front of like mum's friends. And I built my confidence up that way, doing those presentations at the weekend, doing the makeup. And that gave me the confidence at work to suddenly like present, because we were pitching for work. So it's quite a significant thing at work. We'd either win the deal or not. So it was a big deal, right? And I was only 23, 22, and I'm like, oh my God. Whereas the version V parties felt more comfortable. So I think if you're worried about work, for me, it was about practicing in a more familiar environment, at church with all my mum's friends was a safer place to be, and practicing in those kind of environments rather than just going straight to work. Lynn, what about you? What's been your experience of
Yeah,
presenting?
do you know what? I think, so resonates what you're saying, because I think for me, it was completely out of my comfort zone. I mean, I remember you throwing me straight in and saying, do a live. And I was like, what's a live? So, it was actually something that I just got on with and did. I mean, this is a great session for me, because I'm looking forward to hearing more about, how to present yourself, and it does come with confidence. As you said, Natalie, it's definitely something that the more practice you get, the more you can talk. Because I mean, I'll go on a live now and talk for 20 minutes, probably about rubbish, but I still talk for 20 minutes. So I think it's really great to hear about how you should be doing it to make it, like you say, maybe not exactly perfect, but just to get it so it sounds okay even. And I think I remember, from my side, I remember doing a podcast once and my battery dropped. So I lost all of the questions. And I think it's all about preparation, isn't it? When you think, if you're prepped for it, it doesn't matter if you don't have any questions ready, you're prepped and ready. But a good question, I think, would be good from my side is, how would you prepare for a presentation? Is it something that you spend hours on, or do you just have a topic and just go with the flow?
I think everybody is different, and the more people I meet, the more I understand how different people are. Some people love to prepare to the absolute nth degree, and if they don't, they panic. Other people don't like that sort of constriction almost. They'd rather just be spontaneous, stand up and let it flow. From my perspective, I think whichever way you are, the most important thing is to think about your audience. I think when we get challenged with whether it's a presentation, running a meeting, having a one-to-one, whatever it is, we think about, oh my gosh, I'm really busy. I've got to pull these slides together. I've got to prepare an agenda. Oh, I haven't got time to do it. And I hate presenting and I'm not very good at it. Whereas if you actually think, I've got this group of people, what do they need to know? What does success look like for them? How should they be feeling at the end of the session? What do I want them to think? What do they need to go and do? And what's the best way of communicating that? And then pull together whatever it is to the level of detail that you feel comfortable with based on that. Because I think back to my early days, and some of my presentations, gosh, they were like days long, because I had so much stuff that I wanted to tell people, and I was going to tell them every single thing because I'd done it and thought it was really important. And you're sort of waking them up at the end of it. Whereas they don't need to know everything, and different levels of seniority need to know different things. Different groups of people will respond to different messages and different ways of communication. So really for me, preparation is thinking about what's the audience, what does success look like when they walk out of the event, whatever it may be, what do I want them to be saying? And focusing then my preparation on that. And it feels far less daunting because it usually reduces the amount of work you've got to do. You've got to be much more focused. And the other thing to remember is that people can only really remember 3 things. You know, if you bombard them with 17, and you ask them at the end of the day to tell you them all, they're not going to remember. So again, if you think, well, what are the top 3 things this lot need to know? What's the top 3 things my boss needs to know in my one-to-one today? What's the top 3 things that the team need to be working on before next week's catch up? It makes it much more focused, much less daunting, and you've got a real purpose behind it rather than this, oh my gosh, where do I start? What do I do? What do I say? I'm already overwhelmed. And then you get paralyzed by fear, I think. So think about your audience and make it focused.
That is such a great tip. And I think that 3 things, it's funny how somebody says something to you sometime and it stays with you. I think that I'll definitely remember that. Three things to remember. And I think, it's not like you just said, it's about understanding your audience, having an end goal and then going with it rather than having, reams and reams of stuff that you want to say. So yeah, really great tip. Thank you.
It's a really good point, isn't it? And I when I'm coaching people at Supermums and we do CV interview prep, and they're really nervous and anxious about the interviews, and I say, well, practice, rehearse. It's like being an actress doesn't go on stage for the first time and just do it without willy-nilly.
True.
Practice your key points, and encourage them to use ChatGPT. Think about the questions that people might ask and come up with some like ready-made answers. They come up with your 3 or 4 answers, and practice saying it over and over again, because it's just like you're acting and you're in a stage environment. So I think that practice and clarity on what you're going to respond in those questions is really, really important. But one of the things that I think comes back to is if you're sitting in that space just before you're going to present, whether it's an interview or a boardroom, whatever, what is it that you can do to calm your nerves? Because they say nerves is normal, right? But how do you sort of recenter yourself and not freak out at that point?
Breathing, I think, is a really good practice to get into. Lots of people do yoga, Pilates, mindfulness anyway, but even if you don't, Google breathing and there are loads and loads of different options. But we've got, 2 big lungs that we should be filling up with oxygen and exhaling slowly. In our busy, frantic lives, we've all become very lazy.
I start breathing when you say that.
Yeah, no, I'm doing that.
Yes. Because we've all become and we breathe very much from up here now. And so when you then get nervous, it's very easy to switch into that sort of hyperventilating, shallow breathing. Whereas if you slow your breathing right down, really try and fill your lungs up, exhale really slowly and count. Again, if you Google it, there are all sorts of box breathing, in for 5, out for 7, in for 7, out for 11, all sorts of different numbers. And the process I find of counting those breaths and concentrating on your, filling your lungs up, exhaling gently, you're rooting yourself back in yourself. You're focusing on counting in your breathing, so your mind isn't spiraling into the what ifs and the panics. And you just become much more rooted and much more mindful. So I think breathing is a really, really good technique to practice. Another one that is, again, back to what we were saying earlier, I find really helpful, sounds a bit silly, but to give yourself a pep talk, to acknowledge the fact that you're nervous. I'm going to get nervous, means I want to do a good job. I know the nerves will pass. By the time I've done this, I'm not going to be nervous anymore. And to tell yourself that you're good. and that you can do it, that you're good enough. You don't need to be perfect, but it's going to go well. Because I think, again, often we sit there and we say, oh, I'm so nervous. I'm dreading it. I'm rubbish at presenting. And then you spiral yourself into sort of quite negative energy. Whereas if you tell yourself it's going to go well, I'm going to have a big smile on my face, I'm going to walk in positively, you're much more likely to make that happen. And another thing, sort of building on that, is visualizing. If you visualize it, practice visualizing it before you get to the meeting, before you get to the interview. How do you want it to go? And I'm not a brain surgeon or a brain scientist, but it's something about the neural pathways in your brain. Look for ways to make things happen. So very successful sports people will visualize themselves winning the race, scoring the goal, whatever it might be. And again, if you visualize it going well, you're much more likely to make it happen. And conversely, if you visualize it going badly, your brain's going to look to make that happen. So breathe, positive self-talk, visualize things going well, and a bit of a power pose, get the energy going.
Love that. I learned power poses when I did my coaching course, and mine's the kite surfing one, where I'm like, I didn't have, it's in my 20s, going across the water, and that power, feeling confident and powerful.
Yes.
So it's always good to have your power pose.
It is. And again, it feels slightly silly, and it puts a smile on your face. And I find, doing it before you turn a camera on, if the meeting's virtual, doing it in the bathroom before you go into the meeting or the interview, works wonders. So definitely give it a go.
Yeah, just don't start you doing yoga in reception.
No, possibly not.
It's as well, Heather, because you put your pink jacket on and become someone else, I guess.
I know.
Yes.
Well, I sort of advocate around when I put makeup on and I get ready for something, I feel confident. But we shouldn't need makeup, so I'm not advocating that we need makeup. But I do feel like more ready and confident in myself. It's like when we put high heels on.
Yeah. True.
Again, not advocating that has to be the case, because part of me, you don't have to. But for me, that does make me feel. And my mum, even though she worked at home, she'd always get dressed up to work at home, and she'd go into her office all dressed up every day. Because you put them in the work mode.
But it works. And studies showed that doctors who wear a doctor's jacket are far more likely to be respected and believed, as it were, by their patients than equally qualified doctors who just turn up in their normal clothes. And I think it's also that I always say, if you go in feeling confident, looking the part with a smile on your face, you're much more likely to get a positive response because you feel confident and you're smiling. Whereas if you sort of shuffle in, or you've got your arms crossed and you're feeling really defensive, you're going to get that back as well. And if you smile and feel confident, people smile back and give you that confidence. Yeah. It's a proper virtuous circle.
I'll tell you another little
strong believer that you can put your own vibes off and control a room that way for sure. I think that's definitely true. I often find that telling a personal story rather than having bullet points, I think is always good, because you want to engage with everyone, and you want them to, what you're telling them, to make them feel like it's about them, and to make sure that it resonates with them, I think. And I think that's really important as well. I mean, how would you engage an audience? How would you say that, during a presentation, you're going to keep everyone listening to what you're saying, basically?
And, some topics are easier than others. Storytelling, as you say, is absolutely key. Equally, some people aren't very good at storytelling. That's absolutely fine. And so don't try and force yourself if you know that that's not naturally your strength. I'm a firm believer in be authentic, work for the style that works for you. And if you are going to tell stories, they absolutely need to be relevant. And, I sat through a presentation a couple of months ago now, which was peppered with anecdotes, none of which were at all relevant to what they were trying to say. And so in the end, it's actually quite disengaging. On a practical level, I think introducing yourself and what people are in the room for is key, because everybody wants to know why they've given up their time, and they want to be reassured that you are worth listening to and that what you're going to say is worth listening to. And again, like you were saying, Heather, about practicing, if you can practice that introduction and practice introducing yourself and the speech, the meeting, whatever it is, and you say it really confidently, you are so much more likely then to carry on the rest of the presentation, because you know you are off to a good start. If you stumble over your words, don't say what you wanted to say, don't feel as though you introduced yourself with justice, you then find that sometimes then that leads into a less than successful presentation. So I think a really good presentation, keeping the energy up is another one. Body language, eye contact, smile, so that you look as though you're enjoying it. And again, it brings back that enjoyment for other people. And like I said at the beginning, if you've thought about the audience and you're telling them what they need to know in a way that works for them, by definition, hopefully that will be quite engaging. And I work with a lot of finance companies, insurance companies, and there are always analogies you can use, metaphors you can use, stories you can use, images you can use to make it engaging rather than just a load of spreadsheets and, something that's quite dry. And my final tip would be have a really good call to action at the end, reinforce to people what they need to go and do, having sat and listened to you, so that they're motivated and leave on a high rather than a sort of, oh, is it finished now? What do I do now?
Remember to breathe.
Yes.
Yeah. Remember to breathe and smile. It's interesting, isn't it, about PowerPoints and different learning styles. So you've got some school of thoughts are like, I'm very much like talk from the heart now. And I think that's what I found is rather than sort of going what's on my slides and what am I doing, I have those cue points, but you've obviously rehearsed it. So you talk from the heart and you talk about passionate about. But also at Supermoms, we talk about different learning styles because as a training company, we have to be mindful that people absorb information in different ways. So we talk about there's visual learners that want to see something. There's audio learners that want to hear it. Obviously, there's audio digital that want the detail. And then you've got the kinesthetic where they kind of need to be fiddling with something or need to hold something, like you need to give them a PowerPoint presentation printout or something to sort of materialize it, or they want to practice what you're telling them. So I'm always mindful of this, and I teach this on our course to our students. It's like when you're presenting, think about how you're giving it in different ways. Now, obviously, people say death by PowerPoint, so how do you mix that all up? Like, what would be your ideal combination to get the visuals, to be hitting all those learning styles?
Yeah, death by PowerPoint is absolutely a thing. And I've seen some very, very painful PowerPoints that have got such small fonts on them. And even in the front row, you can't read what they say. So I'm a firm believer in less is more, using imagery, using big fonts, using not that many words. It is slightly different depending on the context. I mean, if you are delivering training, you might include a bit more information because obviously people need to know a bit more. And rather than everybody scribbling down loads of notes, you might need to have a bit more on the page. If you're delivering a big creative presentation, you might just have images, you might be sharing videos, things that bring it to life really well. If it's a very technical presentation, to your point just now, sending things as a pre-read or giving things as a printout in that meeting. So you might have the key headlines on a screen, but actually everybody's got a massive big spreadsheet in front of them so that they can actually see the detail because they're never going to see it on the screen. Or if it's a more workshop approach, again, giving people paper pads so that they can be scribbling and contributing whilst you're presenting. But I think whatever you're doing, less is more on the slides themselves, and sending things as a pre-read, having things in the room, or sending things as a follow-up. And if you do know, again, that people want to have that tangible learning ability in the room, come with a pile of printouts so that they can make notes, they can scribble and do it. But visually, absolutely less is more, and try to use as much visual pictures, videos to bring it to life as much as you can.
Love that. Some reflective questions. We're actually doing a Supermums event tomorrow, aren't we? We've printed out some things.
We have.
And to hold on to. Yeah. We're not presenting though. Well, we are presenting on tables, actually. I'll tell a lie. It's more informal presentations, isn't it? But yeah, just getting that combination of things right, isn't it? So they feel engaged and asking questions. I think the audience, then you reflect on that, didn't you, a moment ago?
Yeah.
Yes.
And sorry, I was just going to say, from my side, just, on what you just said, I remember sitting through a presentation once, and there was about 200 words on each slide, and the presenter was actually reading every word. They weren't actually, I mean, it really was. I mean, I don't think anyone made it past slide 5 awake. So, and I think, it's good to know not only what goes well, what works well, But from your perspective, where do people go wrong? What are things that people should be avoiding on presentations?
Well, and like you've just said, 200 words, and you're not alone. I think many people would have seen that. And it goes back to that fact that it's a comfort blanket. We think that the more we put on the slide, the less we are going to forget, and that we use it as a prompt. And, we worry that people aren't going to understand us. But again, it's that confidence in knowing what we talk about. So less is absolutely more. Taking the time, I think, to prepare and believe in what you're saying, because often when people are really nervous, they just want to get through it. Their ultimate objective is to get through it as quickly as they can. And then that's when they speak really quickly. They don't pause for breath. And speaking really quickly and not pausing are the two biggest factors in people losing their train of thought. And that's what I hear so often. Oh, my mind goes blank. I don't know what to say. And it's usually because people are just whizzing along, desperate to get to the end, and don't give themselves time along the way to regain control. So doing the preparation that you need to do beforehand to give you that confidence and to tell yourself that it's going to go well, enables you then to take your time a bit and to take it steady and to be in control of what you're saying. Having less information on the slides and having the confidence to talk around it. I think notes can be a tricky thing as well. And I was speaking to somebody in the week who writes everything out and literally has a script. And then when he loses that space or loses his place on the script, it's game over. So if you do need notes, and that's absolutely fine, get little flashcards like children use at school and just write down the couple of things that you need prompting on, because almost without fail, everybody I speak to knows it deep down. You get them to do an off the cuff presentation and they are so fluent and so articulate. And it might be a stat that you can't remember. It might just be those 3 points that we talked about, point A, point B, point C, but not having a script that rattles in the wind. And then when you lose your place, you don't know where you're going anymore. So those are probably the top things that I see that go wrong.
I think maybe they're losing their train of thought because they're too busy counting with their breathing.
Well, and this is the other thing. There's so much to think about when you put it all together, and you can't do it all. We are all only human. So my other point would be to focus on the one thing that will help it be better for you. And whether that is breathing, whether that's slowing it down, whether it's managing your notes, whatever else, body language, focus on one or two things, not everything, because otherwise your head explodes.
I need to spend a day with you for sure.
Well, that leads me on to the next question, really, because I think obviously people who are listening to this have got the appetite to want to present. And all of those sound great, but in principle, it's like, well, actually, how do I get from A to Z here? Working with a coach, what are the things how can people benefit from working with somebody? What are the sort of things you would be doing with somebody to kind of move them along in their confidence?
Confidence is exactly the key word. 99.9% of people are just not very confident, or they're nervous, or both. And it could be a different thing. It could be that they're happy presenting to 2 people, but give them 20 people and the nerves come. Often people don't like presenting to people they know. They find that much more threatening because they think they're going to be judged. Equally, other people hate presenting to strangers. So a lot of the work I do is confidence building, with specific tips and strategies to help build your confidence and manage your nerves. And then they're really practical sessions when I coach people, because it isn't theory. It's all about putting it into practice. So there are a number of things that I work with people in terms of how they speak, their body language, how they structure their content, and then how they deliver it. And we spend a lot of time practicing, but it's a really safe space. So, as I said at the beginning, I'm that cheerleader. I want to build people up, not knock them down, and giving people the chance to practice, to improve, for them to identify what perhaps doesn't work for them, but what they would really like to work for them. And we have lots of exercises, some of which are nothing to do with the workplace, describe your favorite film or tell me about your holiday, that type of thing. And then I work with people on specific work presentations and really helping them hone their message, focus on the audience, and communicate it in a way that really builds that respect and credibility. But they're fun sessions. They're enjoyable. They're practical. It's a really sort of two-way dialogue, an interactive session. They are not. Often people are a bit nervous to start with, but it's good fun. It's not a daunting, scary session.
It's just having somebody helping you practice, isn't it? Because I speak at Salesforce conferences, but the Salesforce employees who present, I'm always in awe of them. And having presented at some of these, I did when I launched Supermums in October 2016. I was invited to Manchester, just had my baby, a few weeks old, and I was going up to present and launch Supermums on this stage in Manchester. And I was in awe, thinking, like, watching them practice. So the vice president, the really senior leaders were up and down the stage, rehearsing. And I was like, oh, that's what they do. Okay, now I get it. And then when I got my golden hoodie in 2019 at the London World Tour, had to go on stage and say like a 2-minute piece. And it was so hard to come up and practice. Now I remember being in the hotel room, like practicing this 2-minute segment, and it's just horrendous. But I was like, I practice. And I think is, all of this, if I just go back for people, I suppose, I was an introvert at school, really shy, didn't like presenting at all. I know, on the back row, right? I was a quiet mouse at school. Don't really recognise myself now. And it's because of all the steps that I've taken. I've taken the steps of going on a presentation skills course when I was in my 20s. I paid for it myself. Work didn't pay for me. But because I knew I needed to show up and present and do these pitches, and started the Virgin V. So I became an independent makeup artist and did that. And then through presenting at work and building my confidence, I went and became a self-employed consultant and started to build my confidence. I could just present and win work by myself. And I was 26 at this point. And then I built businesses, and then I was presenting, with my first business, I was presenting in front of young people at universities and young entrepreneurs, and I just kept going. So the thing is, you will do oyster. Yes, I have lost my confidence along the way when I've taken time out. And going back, there was a funny story. No, it's not. Is it a funny story? I don't know. It's funny, but I look back now. But when I just come off maternity leave or really being at home, I was still working at home, but I went out for my first proper meeting, and I had to go buy a new outfit from Monsoon. Because I didn't feel like I had any clothes that I felt confident in. And so now looking back, it was a really posh dress I bought. I looked like I'm probably going to the horse races or something. I must have looked well over the top. But because my boobs were quite large, I couldn't really fit in anything with breastfeeding and all this lot. But I had to do that, I had to obviously go buy a new dress, because that's going to be what we need to do as women. But, we had to, I felt better having a new dress and going and presenting. So I think there's all these things that we can do to prepare ourselves. We want to feel good. We want to, look good, whether that's wearing makeup or high heels or not, or whatever it is.
Jackets.
And the jackets, whatever it is, building that confidence is really important. But I've had coaching mentors. I have had a one-to-one coach helping with presentation skills. So I think the key takeaway is, don't ever think somebody's just stepped into that role and they're great at it. The reality is it takes a lot of work to be great at presenting. And if we put in the time and effort, we can all get there. So we want to, particularly at Supermums, we want to encourage more people to present, to feel confident to present at Salesforce conferences and events. I'm really committed to that. We're really delighted to be working with Natalie on helping mobilize more of that. So watch this space. We will be doing masterclasses and getting more people building their confidence to present. We've had some great success stories at Supermums, and some people are now run user groups, they've got MVPs and everything else. And they all started where everybody else was. They didn't do this kind of presentation skills, and they've built their confidence. So thank you, Natalie, for sharing everything with us today. I've just rambled for 5 minutes, but I think it's just really important, because a lot of people put me on a pedestal because of where I am, but it was where I started. And I think it's really important that we're working with people like yourself, because we all want to empower people, and we love seeing the success stories, don't we?
We do. We absolutely love a success story.
The back of it.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, and it's absolutely great to look at people who inspire you, but also we're our own selves. And whilst you may look at other people who present really well and think, wow, they do a great job, it's sort of still being true to yourself and not trying to be somebody that you're not. And, I hear from a lot of people, oh, so-and-so is brilliant and I want to be just like them. And it's sort of, well, no, actually, you probably want their confidence, but then you want to present just like you. And, so, channeling your own self and being authentic to yourself and giving yourself the confidence and the positivity to be able to do it is really important, so that we can all shine as individuals ourselves and not trying to be somebody, who we're not and we don't need to be.
I love that. Do you know what's funny though? We spoke at the beginning of this, Natalie, where we said you almost want to press record without anyone knowing, because we had a lovely conversation before we started, and then you hit record and everything changes, doesn't it? Got to breathe.
That pressure of like, what am I saying again? And everything goes out of your head. You're like, okay, bring it back. It's normal, right? It happens to all of us, whatever situation, however practiced we are. Is that kind of like, so it's normal to have those nerves. And I think you've normalized a lot of stuff today, I think, Natalie, like it's there for all of us. And there's all these strategies, like we can't just stand up tomorrow and be able to do this stuff. It's practice, rehearsal, iterate, improve. We can all present if we want to.
I mean, when we're born, we can't even speak. So you sort of think of the journey we go on to be able to speak, let alone present. It's a muscle to grow.
Exactly. And I think, the fact is we're presenting in interviews. We all have to go to job interviews if we want to get a job. We are presenting in those environments. And then they say that might be in front of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and you just build it up from there and go on it. So really, thank you so much for all your tips today. They were absolutely amazing. We are here to help anybody that wants to kind of build their presentation skills. Natalie offers one-to-one support. We will be doing a follow-up masterclass around building your skills and confidence to present at Salesforce events as well. If you're in that space, you might be listening and not involved with Salesforce, it might be in your own industry. But we can't wait to help you on this journey. So thank you, Lynn, for co-hosting. Thank you, Natalie, for being here, and we shall see you all again soon.